If you are a fan of the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast and would like to help support the show, there's a great way that you can do that and start a new fashion trend. We have a new merchandise page on the website which features t-shirts and hoodies that are available for sale on Amazon. Just click on merchandise in the top menu and all of the links will be there, or go directly to divebarrockstar.com/merchandise. Get started early on your Christmas shopping at divebarrockstar.com. Welcome to the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast, a show exploring the lives of professional musicians of all types, touring musicians, recording artists, songwriters, engineers, bar bands, wedding bands, and anyone making their living in the music industry. Whether you've dreamed of being a professional or you already are one, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Eric Baines, and I hope that you not only find some entertainment here, but also some helpful tips, trade secrets, and ideas that will help you achieve your dreams. So it was somewhat recently announced that Dwight Yoakam, with me on bass and vocals, will be playing Red Rocks Amphitheater in Morrison, Colorado on the 31st of this month. And it's only the second time that I've played there, but it's a big deal for me, you know, having grown up in Denver and in that area. So that was always the dream gig to get, if you could only play Red Rocks, you know. And if you've never seen a show there, you definitely should, because it's one of the most beautiful venues in the country, and the history is just insane. Like the Beatles played there, and Jimi Hendrix, John Denver, the Blues Brothers, Carole King, the Carpenters, Sonny and Cher, you know, among just hundreds and hundreds of other awesome acts. U2 recorded their Under a Blood Red Sky album and concert film there. So I'm a little bit excited, and it's going to be awesome. August 31st. And then I just happened to get a text from an old friend from Denver not too long ago. And so I thought, well, that's meant to be. So let's have him on as a guest. He's an awesome drummer. He was a member of my original band in the 90s, The Fringe in Denver. And we played hundreds of gigs together in that group and other groups before he moved to Los Angeles. And out here, he became the drummer for the German punk rock star Nina Hagen. And after that, he was signed to Elektra Records with a band called Ghettoblaster. And then his life took all kinds of other crazy turns. So I'll just let you listen to the interview and enjoy it. But he's a great guy and an awesome drummer. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Jeffrey Mince. First of all, you're still in Denver, or you're back in Denver.
I'm back in Denver. I basically came back for the pandemic.
How is Denver? You know, that's where we met. That's how, you know, I kind of miss it a lot of times. I mean, I love LA, like love it. You know what I mean? Like I found my home and it's been so amazing, but I do still have this romantic notion of Denver and memories of playing in the scene. So you're gigging around there and stuff? Or are you know, obviously in the studio and...
Yeah. I was gigging up until the pandemic, and it took me a minute to reconnect with the people that I'd been playing with, you know, because I was gone for 10 or 15 years.
Right.
But I ended up playing with some of the same people. You know, I ended up playing Reggae on the Rocks with Judge Roughneck, other bands. So I got to do some pretty big gigs, and then essentially the locally big gigs.
Right.
And essentially the pandemic shut everything down, and I'm just regrouping now.
Got you. So obviously you're in your studio. Is that where you live as well, or you have a separate spot?
No, I have a separate spot where I live. Yeah, this is just it's basically a warehouse space.
Oh, cool.
24/7, and it's pretty cool. It's like an old grocery warehouse, so you get like these wood floors and brick walls and all that kind of stuff.
Cool stuff for recording drums.
It is, yeah. That's something I focused on during the pandemic, was getting my kit mic'd up really well. So it's just plug and play and being able to do some tracks. So I've got a few projects going on just based on being able to send tracks hither and yon over the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of essential to everybody now.
Really is. kind of glad that happened in a way, because it's really made me aware that you can actually do that really successfully. It's not the same as being in the same room, of course, but
Right. But now everybody, I don't know that anyone tracks in the same room anymore anyway. It's like
good, excellent point.
it's not even a thing, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking about, because I was listening to the Leland Sklar podcast recently, and just what he was saying about his in-ears. He's like, I'm not going to wear any ear. I didn't want to wear any ears because there's the vibe and being able to talk to people. And I think just even like between takes, when you're sitting in the control room, hanging out with your bandmates or whoever you're recording with, can really open up the actual track in the long run.
I was thinking about it. The first time I saw you play was with Sundance and the Men in Blue. I
remember that band. Weren't you in that band?
I was eventually in it, yeah. And it was like blues and sort of rock and blues, So was that something you enjoyed playing? We both sort of came from that blues scene, because after that, the next band we were in was The Fringe, because I basically stole you out of the band, and that was my band. But then when that sort of collapsed, I was like, I just want to gig. I want to play my bass. I want to show up, and I want to go home. I don't want to be a band leader anymore, So then I went back into the blues. But the blues in Denver in the 80s and 90s was kind of like a thing. It was a pretty serious scene. And you being a college-educated drummer, was that a fun gig for you?
Yeah, I think, again, I was a punk then, and I don't think I appreciated what I was being handed at the time. And I would get a little belligerent. This will make it into the podcast, but I swear that I refused to bring a ride cymbal to that gig for a while. And I'm like, I look back at that and you're like, what a fucking little dick, really? And I don't know why, honestly, but I think I did have a bit of an attitude for a while there. But looking back on it, you're right. Like, that whole scene was pretty happening. There was a lot of great blues bands. There were a lot of great, I was playing a lot of reggae and ska at that time as well.
Right.
And I remember that the gig scene, the clubs were packed out, and, the pay was crappy, and it's still pretty crappy. I think it hasn't changed much, right. But the gigs were super fun, and people like you were available. Like, the level of musicianship was really high from what I can recall. I learned a lot. And then the studio work that came along with that, again, I learned so much that was really helpful when I ended up, in LA, and, being presented with click tracks and pre-recorded drum tracks that were needed to be replaced, or whatever it was I was working with. I at least had some experience, and I owe that all to Denver.
Very cool. And then, like I said, I kind of stole you. And I had a band with my brother and another friend from high school, Tony Hanneman, and we had a band called The Fringe, which we were kind of an all-original band when we met you. Well, I mean, not all original. We were never all original, but we did covers that we wanted to. Or I remember playing in Boulder or whatever. People everywhere you go, Sweet Home Alabama. So we made up the most fucked up version of Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was a fun band. And I felt like I've always I think about Tone every once in a while. You called him Tone.
Yeah.
And I just think about him every once in a while and kind of wonder what he's up to, But I just remember that fun. It was the songwriting, honestly, that I thought attracted me to the band. And then again, there's a level of musicianship that I have come to appreciate that people like you offered at that time, that helped me raise the bar as far as my own playing went.
Well, that's cool.
You know anything about Tone?
Yeah. In fact, I just saw him over Christmas. In fact, shoot, if you're there, the next time I'm in town, we should all get together. We actually this was before I got the Dwight gig, so it was 4.5 years ago. We had a little Fringe reunion of the original 4 guys with Kevin Lehman on drums. We didn't play or anything, but we just all met at a bar. And so maybe next time we'll have to have an extended Fringe reunion.
Yeah.
We'll have you and Jimmy Ozell was subbing for you.
Wow, really?
And Dan Farmer.
Dan Farmer was in that band?
Yeah, he was starting to replace my brother, which is ultimately why I got out of it, because it was because by then we had gotten into the top 40 scene. And so they had all these expectations of top 40 stuff. We're doing less and less originals, and you're subbing out, my brother's subbing out. And I was just like, I don't want to do it anymore. It just the soul killing experience of top 40 clubs playing 5
Yeah.
nights a week, you know?
Yeah. I did that. I feel I'm glad that I played my drums for that many hours in a row for that long. But you're right. It kind of sucks the life out of you if you're only doing that. And I think that's why, both you and I left sort of the relative comfort, at least for me. I left the relative comfort of being, on call and steady gigs and just like bailed out and like, okay, fuck it. I started out in San Francisco and I ended up playing in blues clubs there for about a year before I transitioned to Los Angeles.
Got you. I remember one time we had a whole week like cancel or something, and you were just like, honestly, I'm so relieved to not have to do that week of top 40 gigs.
Wow.
That was a very telling situation for me because I'm just kind of going through it at the same time of just like, I didn't want to do those gigs either. You know what I mean?
How do you think that affected did that affect your decision to move to LA? That
was really honestly good 8 years before I left, because then I went on and got the gig with Nelson Rangel I was with the Creighton Holly band for 3 or 4 years. And then I got the gig with Nelson Rangel, smooth jazz saxophone player. And that sort of changed my whole world. At that point I had moved up a level. He's signed to a label in New York. So I get to travel now and, I'm getting I'm getting a track or two on his record where I get to play and, Will Lee's on the same record. And I'm starting to move in a situation where it's like, it started, honestly, I mean, this podcast is not supposed to be about me, but it started to get weird to come home, and no offense to local musicians, but it was like the conversations start to get harder when people don't really understand what it's like to go and the pressure of playing a gig in New York, compared to coming home to Denver. And it's a kind of a hard thing to explain, but when I went to visit LA and I just thought, I'm surrounded by people who do what I do. They drive nice cars. They have houses. They understand, and Denver's awesome, great musicians, but it just was so far from where I wanted to be, I guess, that was really the thing that started making me think I need to move. I mean, honestly, the Fringe experience was interesting because I wanted to be Toto in the 90s when it was like Two Princes and all these jam bands were like, were the thing. Yeah. And being in near Boulder, which is like the jam band capital of the world at that point, I just did not fit into the scene at all. Yeah. I think our band did not. I was trying to go for this R&B, slick pop production, and the world wanted, 3 chords played loudly with a strange voice over it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of what I'm confronting now because I've been, in this area for, over a year. And then honestly, I was playing gigs, and what happens is that you start to realize that there's a difference in the commitment to your instrument. Mm-hmm. If you're not being challenged in a city like Los Angeles, and some of us are like, want that challenge. Some of us are like, I want to be like, challenged, like, intellectually and musically, I want to throw myself into situations that are going to be hard, and then people like that leave the comfort of their local band scene,
right.
And then if you come back, so coming back from LA, I know a lot of good musicians, but none of them have the level of commitment or professionalism. And I'm going to get like stalked and stabbed. But it doesn't feel like the level of professionalism because LA it's a professional entertainment industry.
Yeah.
If you're not good enough, there's 10 people right behind you who are good enough.
Exactly right.
And so you got to be good. You have to have your shit together. Whereas on a local scene, there's not that much pressure to be good.
Right.
And so the level of playing for many local bands is, to me, it's not as high as I would like it to be. And if I said anything about it in the context of a band, I would come across as like an arrogant fuck. But to have you say it back to me and that we can, communicate on that level, it's just absolutely true, to have the guts to move to LA, to, probably New York. I barely ever lived there. you have to really, really, really want to be up for the challenge of being faced with great musicians everywhere you go.
That's exactly it. That's exactly right. And if you're the kind of person who sees somebody way better than you and says, "Oh my God, I'm going to bury my instrument in the ground and I'm never going to play again," LA is not the town for you. If you're the kind of person who sees somebody way better than you and says, "I got to go home and practice," that's a person who's going to thrive. And that's what I loved about it as well. I mean, I think, I feel like that's where we connected, as musicians as well. I feel like that was the thing. Because when I saw you, at the time I had a fine drummer, Kevin Lehman, in the Fringe. And, but this was before Kevin came to LA. And he's sort of fresh out of CU in Boulder. And it was not, we didn't see eye to eye as far as grooves. And then I played with you in Sundance, and we could, like, in the middle of a shuffle, change up the groove or do something different, and it was still funky, and it was still, it was all, the pocket was there. And I was like, this is what I want in my band. I need someone to start with the pocket and the groove and not the chops necessarily, but that was the ultimate thing. It was like, you get frustrated with the musicianship, and you get to LA and there's never a lack of musicianship. Like you said, there's more like 30 guys that are waiting to take your gig,
It's true. I was being conservative, that's for sure.
And they're all incredible, and they've all come from they're the best guy in their town, and they came to LA, So you moved to LA, and what was the first thing you did when you got out here? Did you know some friends, or how did you get started?
Yeah, there had been a migration of musicians from the Denver and the Northern Colorado area. So by the time I got out there, I knew, a number of people, and there was a big, huge hip hop orchestra called Dakah, Dakah. And that was Jeff Gallegos and Josh Lopez. These are all Colorado people. And they all came out to LA and started sort of like infiltrating various different, scenes. And so I pretty much had a gig at the Temple Bar as soon as I got there. Do you remember the Temple Bar?
Yeah, very much so. Santa Monica, right?
Yeah, in Santa Monica, yeah. And I was playing with a band called Rhythm Room All Stars, and that's Josh Lopez, who's, as far as songwriting goes, he's a guitar player, but has been nominated for a few Grammys because he's co-written with Will.i.am and a few other people, and Davey Chegwidden, who's a percussionist, who's actually I'm his son's godfather, does a lot of work out there in the studios, and has done a lot of video game work, stuff like that. So has made a living as a percussionist in LA. But these are all Colorado people, kind of migrated out there. Kaveh Rastegar is a Colorado guy. Do you know of him? He's
that's name rings such a bell.
He's like a cover of Bass Player magazine bass player.
Got you.
But he's a Colorado guy. I used to do sessions with him in Denver all the time. He's on everybody's record now. So anyway, by the time I got out there, I had a place to stay. I had some gigs, and I was able to, at least get by for a while, living in like a group musician house in North Hollywood someplace, and
living the dream.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough for sure. It's like hot dogs from 7-Eleven for dinner every night, and but it was fun. I really enjoyed that challenge. There's a lot of great places to play in LA, at least at that time.
Yeah,
smaller venues.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's changing all the time. It's going to be interesting to see what survives the pandemic and what doesn't. As far as places to play. But I think the demand for music right now is off the chain because everyone's been deprived.
Yeah.
So it's sold out shows and crowded venues at this point, since we just opened up like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah. Have you been gigging yet, or are you guys, is your tour just starting?
We've done like once a month. So our first run was April. So we went 13 months, with no gig.
There's a hole in my heart when I think about that. Like, I can't believe it, how long it's been since I played a gig.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for me, I just needed a break, and I needed the world to stop for a minute so I could, get my wife pregnant, and I had built this studio, and I'm on the road all the time. So then I had a year to be in it, and it was just, I just needed a break so bad. I think Because that's the one thing about Denver that's attractive to me in my brain now. It's like the pressure in LA, even no matter what level you get to, it's always there. It's never, and eventually it's exhausting, you know? Wouldn't it be nice to just go to a gig where no matter what you do, everyone's going to love you and just hire you back? You know what I mean?
Wow. I've been missing LA like a lot, like just a ton. Like I don't know. I think you could come back and it would be great and everybody would love you. But I'm pretty sure that you would start to feel the way I feel, which is like not challenged. You could play the best gig in all of Denver and it wouldn't be as professional as I think you're used to.
Right.
And that's like, so why is that like something that we strive for? I think it's just like being good at your craft.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, if that's who you are, which, you know, even when I was teaching Buddhism full time and not playing drums, I still would hear music or listen to music and have that thing in my heart, you know, that was like, oh, that's who I am, you know, and being good at it is important to me. And so when I come into a band that I feel like could be better, I'll generally say something about it. And that doesn't always go over that well, you know, unless you're in a situation where it's other people that have that same drive, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm afraid you'd come back to Denver and for a long time you'd be like, oh, this is nice. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And you'd be like, shit, it's too quiet. It's too peaceful. There's not enough challenges, you know?
You're probably totally right.
Because you get old enough to where you don't want to gig.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I always just say that too. Like if I wasn't a musician, I probably would have never left Denver because it's a gorgeous place to live. It's pretty amazing, you know? Although if I never see snow again, I'll be fine with that too. I'm not excited about it. But, well, that's totally true. So you eventually get the Nina Hagen gig. Is that kind of your first big gig when you got out there?
Yeah, honestly, that was another Colorado connection because the bass player in her band was somebody I knew from Colorado days. I never actually knew him, this guy, Brad Van Lunen, but, you know, we knew of each other and we had run into each other at gigs in LA a couple of times. And so when he got that gig and they were looking for a drummer, he called me up. So, you know, I auditioned for that and ended up getting it. And yeah, that was the first, you know, actual touring, you know, big venue kind of gig I'd ever done.
Had you heard of her before you got the gig?
It's kind of like the same the way it is now regarding Nina. If you know about her in the US, it's because you have a specific, you know, like taste for that kind of music. So she was in my mind. And I may have heard like one or two songs in my lifetime, but I wasn't that familiar with her until I Googled her and started listening to her catalog and started figuring out who she was. Cause she's not just a musician. She's an icon. She's like the first young woman rock star out of the Eastern Germany.
Right. East Berlin, she's from, right?
Yeah. So I think before the wall came down, her family were artists and musicians in the East, and she ended up kind of immigrating to the West. But, you know, as she was a fashion icon, like in the kind of Andy Warhol days, and
God, yeah.
You know,
wasn't she an actress as well?
She's done some acting as well. Her mom, it might be who you're thinking of. Her mom, I think, Uda Hagen, is a famous actress who I think, even as a teacher, an acting teacher. But Nina is the daughter of Uda and then an East German, like folk musician activist.
Got you.
And then in her like 16 or 17, like she was super young, she got hooked up with this sort of it was almost like a fusion band and they made their first record. Okay. White Punks on Dope. Do you remember that song?
No.
White Punks on Dope. It's actually not her song. I forget who it was. But anyway, sort of like kind of semi-complex grooves with kind of, she's operatically trained. So she was doing some like kind of weird operatic stuff. So yeah, I hadn't really heard of her, but when I Googled her, I realized that what an amazing catalog she had. And then when I got to Europe, honestly, we got to Europe and we did not know what we were in for, because she was so freaking popular in Germany. It's like,
Wow.
being swamped, and like we're, playing, for you, it's not that big, but playing 2,000 sold out 2,000 seat venues, and just having like the walls shaking and people screaming, and everybody knows the words to all the songs, and most of them are in German. And so we don't even know what the songs mean, let alone the words to them, to a lot of them. So she's super popular in Germany, France, and South America. So that's where I spent most of my time touring with her.
Very cool. Yeah. And she's, after watching a bit of her on YouTube, it's almost like performance art, she's very in the, I don't know, the music is super eclectic. Like when the only reason I ever knew her name is because of you. Like I'm Hagen, and I was like, oh, she's a punk girl from Europe, and I'm like, oh, okay. But then when I finally listened to it, I'm like, sometimes she's sort of punk rock, and other times it's R&B ish, or like I don't even know how to explain. There's like loops, and like there's more poppy stuff, I guess is what I'm saying. It's eclectic.
Yeah, well, punk rock, when it came out, like for us, listening to Nevermind the Bollocks or any of those like early punk rock albums, they're pretty tame in retrospect. But like at the time, punk rock, was considered to be pretty aggressive and pretty anti-establishment.
Right.
So I think that's the kind of punk rock she came out of. But of course, as she matured as a musician, she did move into other styles, and she, in the 80s and 90s, she was doing a lot of like kind of well-produced rock with like Keith Forsey and some of those producers from that era.
Yeah. And I guess it just struck me as more musical than the Clash or something. I don't know. It's a little more deeper harmony and harmonically, and like there's a lot of cool stuff going on.
But she's definitely worth checking out if you're, like, especially from the video point of view, because she is a performance artist. She's done some incredible videos over the years. And for me as a musician, not really being that familiar with her work, I quickly realized that, she has that thing that really, really good musicians have, where if she's like picks up a guitar and starts, playing a simple chord progression, I would get riveted and other people would get riveted. Kind of like, I think Bob Dylan, of course, has that as well, where you just like,
right,
maybe not traditionally a good vocalist or whatever, but when he does what he does, it's mesmerizing. And Nina definitely has that.
And this was your first big gig. Was it everything that you dreamed of it being? Do you have a tech and stuff and like?
Yeah. I never touched my drums for a few years there. Yeah. I had started exploring electronics. So I kind of invented the Roland SPD-X on my own, where I had like an octapad sampling, an octapad trigger pad. And then I had a sampler. And so I would trigger background vocals and loops and stuff. And so you'll see, if you ever see videos of me playing, whether I'm wearing headphones, because a lot of times I'm triggering loops that it's not like Pro Tools playing through the whole song. It's like I'm triggering a loop for the chorus, or I'm triggering a loop for the verse, or I'm triggering background vocals or effects.
So you weren't playing to a click?
No. I mean, no, there was never a click, but often, well, not often, but part of the time I was playing along with a loop.
Oh, got you. Yeah, because when you're triggering backup vocals and stuff, but there isn't a click, being at the right tempo is a pretty important thing.
Yeah, for those, I had a loop. So you can set up trigger pads so that you can trigger a loop, and then when you trigger the next loop, it shuts off the previous one.
Right.
And so I just got really good at not fucking that up.
And so did she have like an all-American band? Did she live in LA at that point, or?
Yeah. That's why she was putting together her band. She had a house in the Hollywood Hills. And so when we would do tours in the US, and it would be like House of Blues tours, or, not Viper Room, Key Club, venues about that size. We could do that and just do airplane tours, kind of like you, where we just fly into a major city and could do the, one or two shows there.
Got you.
And she would do the shows in English, and the crew would be American.
Gotcha.
We'd go to Europe, and she'd do, the shows were, mostly German and mix of German and English, and the crews were all German. Have you played Germany much?
Not really, no. I did while I was in Denver, actually, I did a DOD tour of Germany. We're in West Germany for like 3 weeks, going to military bases. But I used to kind of joke with Keiko because we did Russia and Eastern Europe, and I was like, when are we going to go to the real Europe? But so no, I haven't done as much in Western Europe at all, really.
Yeah, I was thinking about German crews. I still am in touch with a lot of those guys because very, very laid back people, but incredibly good at their jobs and very, very precise about getting things exactly right. And again, it's like that level of professionalism that, I really admire. But sometimes, we'd walk into a venue and they would make the house switch out the sound system because it wasn't what was on the writer, basically, okay, move all this out and get what we wanted. Like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine the middle of Siberia. Where it's like, you can bitch all you want. There's not what you want. In fact, when we would go to Ukraine, Keiko still used a KX88. And there was like one KX88 in all of Ukraine. And we would pick it up when we get there, go do our touring, and drop it off before we leave.
Wow.
Man. Yeah.
So she didn't bring her controller? Was she, what else was she using besides that? Her sort of signature piano sound is an M1 piano. Oh,
and, so we eventually found an M1 module, or I think there was even eventually, before I left, they had come up with some software that had it. So she was bringing a laptop at that point. But, in the States or in Japan, like a KX88 is pretty regular. It's a pretty easy thing to backline, Yeah. So, it was only, and she's super, speaking of being precise, like working with Japanese people, same thing, the techs over there are just insane and write everything down and measure everything, and everything's exactly how you left it when you
Yeah.
But she also is like, if they're backlining a seat that's the wrong seat, she would carry her seat for a while, actually, because if it's just like a centimeter off, she knows it, and she doesn't, they've got to adjust things, So, it was pretty tricky, but man, some of the bass amps that I would end up playing on I've never even heard of this, or like
funny.
A whole line of Fender bass amps that they didn't have in the States that were like, or like Marshall bass amps, and like just crazy stuff that somebody has laying around in the back of a weird theater in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. It sounds like a real adventure. Sounds like fun, like really fun. But I would imagine that could get a little frustrating if you're not able to, perform at the level that you want to perform at in those.
Yeah.
So I guess you got to go with it,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It was more just the touring is hard. It was overnight trains or like buses with no heat in the middle of winter in Russia. Like, it was really, really hard. It was fun the first maybe 2 times I went and did it, because first time I was in Red Square, I'm just like, I can't even believe I'm here. This is incredible, or at the Kremlin or whatever. But I don't know. I think I did 13 tours over there, and
wow,
by the end I was ready to kill myself pretty much. It was rough. It's probably why I drank so much on those tours as well.
Yeah,
just to
Yeah.
It was really, really hard touring.
We used to fly back and forth from LA to, say Paris for a few shows or whatever. So we do a lot of back and forth. And I just remember the plane trip started to kind of get to me. Like, I think I could still sort of feel it in my shoulders, like that jet lag thing. And I tell my girlfriend now, she's like, let's go to Europe. We should go. I'm like, I don't know, man. If I could just like teleport there and be there.
Oh man, I know. I feel bad about it, but I'm exactly the same way. Like the idea of a 10-hour flight is just no, thank you. Especially like if you're flying Aeroflot and coach. I've had a middle seat to Moscow, or like you're next to an old lady, and like weirdly the old ladies are the worst. They're the ones that don't care at all, and they just spread their stuff out, and and I'm a nice guy, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's like, yeah. And then my back
over, grandma. That's what you got to hear. Say it after me. Shove over, grandma.
Shove over.
I remember being on Air Turkey.
Yeah,
I don't think that Turkey actually has an airline. I'm not sure what I was at, what plane I actually was on, but it said Air Turkey on the side of it. I'm like, it was the unlike any airline I'd ever been on. Every seat smelled like farts. Every single seat. And it was like me and 5 other people on this entire freaking jetliner.
And then when I took, I was thinking of marrying the person I had been with for 7 years, but I had never really spent a full year at home with her. So I was like, and the Keiko thing was it took me a good 2 years just to get enough in-town work to transition out of that. And, 12 years with her, and it was great, but I was tired of Eastern Europe, I guess. I'd played those songs enough. So for a whole year, I didn't fly at all. And it was just so great. Like, my back worked again. And just physically, I just felt better. And so anyways, a million stories. We can not drink and talk about them another time.
or maybe 1 or 2.
I don't want to be a bad influence.
Yeah, right.
I have to confess something. I love books, but I don't love reading. And it's been something that I've wrestled with since I was a kid. I can read. I have read books, but they're very time consuming, and I've spent most of my time trying to build a music career, which takes a lot of time. But one thing I definitely do a lot of is drive in LA traffic on my way to a gig. And there's a solution that combines those two situations, and that's called Audible.com. Audible has thousands of audiobook titles, and you can listen offline anywhere, anytime. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. And they have just a ton of music-related titles, like All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald S. Passman, How Music Works by David Byrne, or Music Production Secrets by Calvin Carter. And you can get a free 30-day trial right now if you visit audibletrial.com/divebarrockstar. That's audibletrial.com/divebarrockstar. I'd like to take a second to thank you for listening to the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast. As a new podcast, getting the word out is a vital part of what it takes to keep the show on the road. Or off the road, as the current case may be. If you would like to support the podcast, all you got to do is subscribe wherever you listen. And if you have an extra minute or two, please leave a review. You can also share and follow the podcast on your social media apps. Okay, enough begging. I hope you're having fun, and once again, thank you for listening. So, all right, so Nina Hagen.
Hagen.
Because that leads to Ghettoblaster, which was a band that was signed to Elektra.
Yeah, it was a management crossover between the Nina Hagen band and the woman who found Ghettoblaster in small town Missouri. She found these guys, and really good band. Some of those small towns, because there's not much to do, I've realized you can find some of the most music conscious, fashion conscious, kids ever, who know everything about the newest bands. And that's what Ghettoblaster essentially came from. There was it was in LA. It was this guy, Theo Mondel, who was with Beck for a long time. He ended up joining the band through the management. And then the management also found me and kind of put us together with these Missouri boys. And then based on that combination of people, shopped the band like crazy and eventually signed the band to Elektra. I remember signing the contract outside the Viper Room on a newspaper machine.
Wow.
Just, I'm like, yeah, this is the rock and roll lifestyle. We had just played some showcase at the Viper Room, and the lawyers showed up and was like, all right, let's go, boys.
Wow. So did you feel a shift going from sideman to like band member? Was that a different sort of consciousness? I don't know.
I think that I always even kept myself in my mind. I think I was still sideman, even though I was a full band member, because it was the lead singer's band. I mean, he was like, wrote the songs, and he had the look, like Bowie has the two different colored eyes. He had that going on, like really just super gorgeous dude. Like, you knew if I was standing next to him, it was pretty clear whose band it actually was. But yeah, so I did sign. So I was a band member, but I didn't have any publishing, and I didn't really have much financial power in the band.
And so you recorded a record. It was great. Eric Valentine producing. Yeah,
and Jacques King, who is probably one of the most sought after recording engineers of these last 10 years or so.
Gotcha.
And of course, I had no idea that I was working with such great people because I was an idiot. But looking back, I'm like, oh man, that was Jacques King and that was Eric Valentine.
Wow.
Yeah, so there were a lot of great people involved and big money, because record labels were the thing then. And we recorded at Eric's studio called Barefoot Studios, and it's in Los Feliz.
Oh, okay.
I forget actually what street it is on, but it was Stevie Wonder's former studio.
Got you.
So it's where Sir Duke was recorded there, and like all those classic Stevie Wonder tunes that and the ones that he played drums on. Like everything on Intervisions, I think he played drums on, and maybe not Songs of the Key of Life, but Fulfilling His First Finale.
Wow.
Yeah, so as far as drumming in that room, I'm like, Stevie Wonder played some of the greatest grooves I've ever heard in my life in this room.
That's so cool. Did you guys tour, or did the record? You were saying the record never came out.
The record never got released, but we were doing like industry showcases. So we were in New York a lot, and
cool.
like I said, just like all the famous rock venues in the LA area, because it were really like a Rolling Stones-ish kind of look to the band. It was one of those bands that was styled by the record company, but then had like a Beck vibe to it regarding like the actual songwriting. So they would put us in, like I said, the Viper Room, the other rock venues on Sunset Strip, like pretty much all those places we would do showcases. And then for a while there's a building in New York City called the Music Building, and it's just like rehearsal studios, recording studios, music stores, and it's all just like one big. And so at some point the record company built us out an apartment with a rehearsal studio in the Music Building.
Wow.
I know, they just throw money at the band.
Yeah.
And so lived there for a while, but and then again, just anywhere there that they could get us in front of industry people, they would have us play, but no real touring.
Got you. And so at some point your life takes a crazy turn that some people would think is a crazy turn, and you get into Buddhism. Is it sort of around the end of that band, or how do we get to being a monk? It's a fascinating story, I'm sure.
Yeah, it really was. I don't know if there's anybody else that's actually made that same transition, but I think a lot of people go through the same mental process that I went through. But even when so let's go back a little bit and say, even when I knew you back in Colorado when we were, young and I was playing in your band, I had an interest in meditation, and I was meditating a lot and reading about it. So I was just one of those kids that, read Siddhartha a bunch of times and, was really interested in, the understanding of the mind and how you can use meditation to train your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, as I was getting more and more work and touring more and more, I was feeling a lack of balance. And, like I said, I was drinking a lot and doing lots of drugs. And, I started getting deeper into like studying Buddhism and thinking about it and to try to find some equilibrium in there. And so when we were in New York, where I was talking about, I had, we were living, there was a lot of time off. We were living in downtown. So I just Googled, meditation classes near me or something like that. Ended up at a Buddhist center nearby. And I realized that they offered not just beginning classes, but like intermediate and college level courses. And I thought, well, that's something I really would like to know more about because of the practicality of Buddhist studies. It's really just, it's an understanding of your mind. And like I said, training your mind and being able to function in the world in a more peaceful way, I would say, or in a calmer way. And that's something that attracted to me about it. So I started going to classes. And then when Ghettoblaster, when the New York thing kind of petered out, we ended up back in LA. And I found that there was the same Buddhist centers were there offering the same classes. So I started attending more regularly. And then when Ghettoblaster got dropped, to put it in the context of the kid that I was then, at least it feels like I was a kid then. I had come like that close, tiny, so about as close as you could possibly get to being a rock star, and all those dreams that you have when you're a little kid and you've never played a gig before and you just started playing drums. All that stuff I'd gotten just right there. And then it all just got taken away by the decision of one record company exec.
Right.
And that was devastating for me at the time. And to answer your question a little more clearly, I'd say yes, the experience of, going through the machinery of the music industry at that time left me in a place where I felt like I needed to think about the world in a more spiritual way to try to, when your sense of worth is all only tied up in your musicianship and external success, to have it all taken away.
Yeah.
Either I was gonna drink myself to death or, shoot heroin and say goodbye, or I was going to find some freaking way to dig myself out of that. I know it sounds dramatic, but that's exactly what happened.
I mean, that sounds perfectly normal, really. I mean, that's the thing about LA and the experiences that we have that I don't think a lot of normal people understand, that it kind of messes you up. When you've flown to Paris on a regular basis, it's hard to go back. It's hard to go then and live a normal life, when you see some of the stuff that, there's a fascinating 5-minute little, I think you call it a monkumentary on your website.
You mean my Rocky monkumentary?
Yeah.
My Makia monkumentary?
Yeah.
In that documentary, it's true that it was really just me looking back at what had brought me to the spiritual life, to the point of where I decided to devote my life solely to spiritual development and helping others. And in that little documentary, the filmmaker Elizabeth Jenkins does a really good job of portraying my life as it was, and then my life the way it became as a monk. And then I think I was able to speak clearly about the reasons why I did make that transition. And it's really straightforward in my mind, in that I was offered to have all of my dreams essentially come true. And then even before the Ghettoblaster thing, when I was touring with Nina, that lifestyle was what I'd always dreamed of.
Right.
And I really have this experience of being dropped off, like getting off the plane in LAX and looking around and going, oh shit, I am still the little kid from, feeling like a little kid from Denver, and there's no meat, there's no substance to my experience outside of the time that I'm actually there. Like I've spent a lot of that time, drinking and maybe not connected to my life as much as I would like to have been. So that experience, it definitely, like, as much as I love it, and I'm still a musician and interested in touring and recording again, but back then I didn't have the emotional strength to understand that I need to feel good about myself rather than having other people tell me that I'm good,
and
to be able to be a stable person.
And that's one of the hardest parts about this industry, period. It's like the vulnerable, the constant vulnerability, and then you get blown up like you're the greatest person in the world, just like you said, and then you get dropped off at LAX and you got to go home and you're just you again. And the sort of constant roller coaster of the ups and downs of it takes a toll, I totally get it. It's so tricky because, like, do you think at the same time it's that without that drive to want to do that and just putting every ounce of your soul in there, you would have never gotten to those places.
Oh man, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's the very thing that's going to screw you up possibly for the rest of your life, or it's something that you're going to have to deal with, for the rest of your life.
I think it's really important. The thing that you're talking about is really important because I still have that drive in me now that says, for some reason I need to be respected and thought of as a good musician and thought of as I have to have that. Yeah. And if I didn't have that, I probably would have stayed in Denver and played reggae and blues gigs for the rest of my life. But like you said, I think you nailed it, is that's the very thing that makes you vulnerable, because somebody in the band or the leader of the band's going to, like, get pissed at you or something. And then all of that, like, shit that you've been looking for, like that justification for your existence and, that assurance that you're a good musician. It's so subjective that it's really hard. And I think it's why so many, famous people publicly just spin out into the like some level of madness.
Yeah. So what was it that tipped you into, like, I'm going to go full on monk?
Depression and anxiety and drug addiction. And just being like, as I got deeper into Buddhism, I saw it as a way to be useful in the world. I had actually always had thought that monks were cool, even when I was a kid. And I met some, ordained people in various traditions, and I realized, so you can actually still be kind of a normal person and take on this, like, persona of, like, this is what I do with my life, which is look within and try to benefit other people, try to improve yourself as a person. And it felt like the right thing to do.
I think the other thing about this path for me too is, like, so it's like I just had a baby, and I was excited for that, because the other thing that I think that's required if you're going to be successful on a big level in the music industry is that, or acting or whatever, it's like the focus is on you all the time. It's on me. Yeah. How am I going to get better? How am I going to get this career going? How am I going to do this? I need to get a better gig. Me. And it's just like survival to a certain degree. It's not like your ego's crazy out of control. It's just that, like, how are you going to survive? It's hard, and it's all me all the time. And it's like, I'm exhausted of that. I was looking forward to having a child and be like, it's not about me anymore. It's about us. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not fulfilling unless you're a narcissist, which I don't think we really are,
No, I mean, maybe a little.
Well, I think if we were, then that would have been, you would have gotten on the road and been like, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I'm satisfied. But it's not that satisfying. You get out there and you're like, this is great. It's everything I wanted. I'm having fun, but how much does it mean anything really? You're just playing gigs. You're just playing gigs to 20,000 people instead of a bar. You know what I mean? It's great, but it's also, is it enough? Is it the end all be all?
Yeah. And that's really, that's a spiritual question. It really is. It's like, what makes your life meaningful? And the fact of the matter is, it's the same for everybody, whether you're, Christian or Muslim or whatever. These fundamental questions end up being the same. And if you're a self-focused narcissist who's only thinking about themselves and is taking advantage of other people and kind of screwing over other people, you're not happy.
Right. Yeah.
Even though you may be rich or whatever, and it may present as power or something like that. Ultimately, like what everybody wants at the end of the day is to feel like they're loved,
right,
and to feel like their life is meaningful. And the kind of narcissistic people that we kind of see appearing around of late, and just really selfish people in their hearts. You can't be that person and have that kind of connected, meaningful relationship with other people that actually makes your life feel like it's got some substance and love, that general term love that's on greeting cards. It is so important because it's a sense of peace and a sense of home and it's a sense of calm that you don't get anywhere else. Yeah. And I've never had a child, but just talking to people who have had them, I think it's an unimaginable amount of like, I would do anything for this other person, from what I can tell.
Or, I don't even know if it has to be that deep. The reality is that I've got to do everything for this kid. You know what I mean? I don't even know. Yeah, because it's weird I don't know. It's weird in the beginning for right now because he doesn't talk. He doesn't really have a personality. He's this blob that shits a lot and but I mean, he's amazing and it's incredible, but until he really can get to know I think that connection is a gradual thing,
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it's different on some level for everybody. So I said, I have no freaking idea. So
yeah, right.
Please continue.
Yes, I agree. I think it is different for everyone. For me, but there's just no question that like I'm looking forward to every second of this kid's life, and I'm looking forward to like whatever I can do to make this kid a great person and to make this thing, which feels so much more important than playing a great bass solo. You know what I mean? I don't think it ever, just to have that something that's bigger than me, anyway.
Yeah, I agree. That's just like an aspect of it. And again, you can be a great bass player touring, the world and playing, great shows and still have a happy, meaningful life. I don't mean to say that.
Right.
But for me, I didn't have the balance of being able to like support myself emotionally and do all that stuff. I had put all of my eggs in the basket of being a performer.
Right.
And that balance wasn't there for me. So being who I am, I just like threw all the weights off the overboard from the balloon. Hey, there's an analogy. It just like went completely the other direction.
Right.
And eventually that came out of balance as well. And,
Right. So that would be my next question. So what brought you back to playing the drums and to playing music? First of all, how long were you like officially, wearing the garb and being a monk?
Well, I had been studying for more than 10 years and I'm still a daily meditator and do retreats and stuff. But by the time I ordained, I had been studying for many years. And then I was officially ordained for about 5 years. And during that time, I was asked to start teaching on the East Coast. So I was doing some teaching in LA. They asked me, like the tradition asked me to move to I ended up in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And then I also taught in Boston and Providence, Rhode Island. So I was the daily teacher at 3 different Buddhist centers. And, I taught, again, entry-level courses, college-level courses, retreats, workshops at those 3 different places. And honestly, what happened is that it was too much for one human being. Yeah. And I started to just like get so burned out. I mean, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And again, I spent all that time just really doing something that I felt strongly in my heart would benefit other people. And just teaching them techniques to be able to like deal with difficult relationships, or to forgive somebody, or even ways to look at addiction that might help them get out of some horrible state of mind they might be in. Giving people tools that I know worked to let go of anger and hatred. There's very valuable tools that everybody should have. But I was so booked up so much of the time that I started to get sick and started to burn out. So eventually I was just like, realized that I was done with that stage of my life and ready to move on.
Well, again, balance.
Yeah, balance, not my middle name.
Wow. So then what happens next? Did you move back to LA or?
Actually, no, I came back to Colorado just to have a place to land because I have family here. And I didn't really know that I was going to go back into music, though I'd always had that connection. Like I said, like, I'd be in my monkmobile driving from venue to venue, and I'd turn on the radio and I'd be like, oh man, I love that song. And I'd feel it, like I want to play that groove, or I'd hear James Brown tune or something. I'd be like, oh my God, this, subtlety of the ghost notes in that pattern or whatever. My heart would just go like, I started looking for a gig locally and practicing. I started getting my chops back.
Yeah.
Little known secret, taking time off can actually be good for you. I think I'm actually, this is going to sound narcissistic, but I think I'm actually better now than I was before.
I absolutely think that's true for me. Taking time off is vital because you just get kind of, you just get into playing the same things, and your muscle memory almost becomes too much, and you start playing from your physical body and not from your head or your heart. You know what I mean? For me anyways. I need to take a break, and just then when I come back to the bass, it's like, oh, I'm playing things from my brain and not just from my muscle memory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm totally looking forward. I know you've been in the Dwight gig for a while, but I'm really looking forward to seeing you play again, because it's been like 15 years or something. I would imagine you've gotten at least a little bit better since then.
That's funny. Well, the funny part about that is that really the Dwight gig is a singing gig. Like I'm singing with him almost on every song, and it's like duets all night basically, and I'm doing all the high stuff and he does all the low stuff. So the bass playing it's traditional country. I literally don't play. I don't play anything that's not on a record, and what's on the record is root 5, or 1-3-5 shuffle. So I don't know if it's the best showcase of me as a bass player at this point.
I think what I really meant when I was saying that is that it would be fun to play with you again.
Yes,
I think it'd be fun to like play some grooves. Like I feel like that connection that we had way back when is probably still there. And then we've just both been through so much weird shit that it's probably going to be still cool. But we're both, hopefully, I'm better than I was then as well.
So you mentioned you're playing some country now too, right?
Yeah. Just funny. Like I recently found your podcast, and I really hadn't played much country at all, except in college. I used to play in Longmont 5 nights a week at the Jack Daniels bar.
Oh man, that must have been rough.
Yeah, but again, like I'm really glad I played my drums that many hours a week. That really it starts to add up. Yeah. But anyway, I just had through a friend of a friend, like every gig I've ever gotten, a guy named Austin Wallert, who's got some connections. Like all his records are recorded and produced in Nashville, but I was asked if I'd want to do that gig, so I'm starting to do the rodeo circuit here in Colorado for a little while. Nice. Like literally rodeos.
Well, my first gig with Dwight was literally my first rodeo.
Yeah, I've never been to one. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting path, starting from chops in Berkeley in college, and just now I'm on a gig where it's not about chops. It's about songs and great songs and melody and writing and good lyrics, and speaking of fulfilling, I think it's the most fulfilling gig in terms of music that I've had.
Oh, really? That's interesting to hear. We have a lot in common. I think we always just got along as friends.
Yeah.
So there's that connection. But then I from listening to these podcasts, I kind of clear that you you made your way into these sub gigs and these really great, like you said, that wedding band. I heard you talking about that recently, and the written hour, and the kind of a different path that I think is suited to you as a more accomplished, like, trained musician. Right. Whereas I end up in like this crazy ass punk bands and like Afrobeat bands and like trying to get a record contract and all that kind of stuff. Two different paths, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I came out and tried to stay very focused, and like even within like studio or live, I'm like, I don't want to be in a cave. I love making records, but I really want to get on the road, and I love traveling and all that stuff. So I want to be that guy. I'm not going to waste time trying to be in a band. It's like I just want to be that guy. Plus, like I said, the Fringe had burned me out from any kind of band leader situation. I just want to go. I want to get paid good money to play my bass and then go home. So it eventually all worked out. But it's 20 years of stories that took me here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of those in between times. Like you and I both can talk about like the high points of all of the stuff we've done, but then there's those like weeks where I did almost nothing and just drank every night and like tried to figure out how I was going to pay the rent or whatever. And but the high points are the high points. I feel super fortunate to have been able to do the things I've done and had the opportunities I've had, and not just in music, but in, to be a Buddhist teacher and, I kind of get back to all of that. And, I'm kind of reapproaching the whole music aspect of my life with a more balanced mind and, feeling more confident in general about everything.
Well, that's so great. Well, judging from your website, it looks like you're getting to a place that's pretty balanced because you're doing some production, and writing songs and doing all the studio stuff and playing gigs, but you're also, I guess, like life coaching, you would call it, or just...
Yeah, it's kind of like life coaching. It's gotten, the idea of life coaching has sort of been formalized as there's specific training you can get. But like what I'm doing, honestly, I was looking for a way to combine all the Buddhist training I've had and the teaching with kind of the understandings that I got from just being a musician, like practicing a lot and, the balanced life sort of issues that you and I have been talking about, bringing that together in a sort of a service that I can offer people who might be navigating difficult times in their lives as creative people of any kind, like coders, painters, whatever, with really specific, purposeful things that can be done, meditation wise, and just, how to approach different difficulties. Like you and I both have said in this interview that we were both punks, and for me, when I was punk, it was because I had ego. I just wasn't sure of myself, and, almost like small man syndrome where you're like, and just really navigating those things and helping bring my understanding, my Buddhist teachings into a place where I can at least try to help other people navigate the same things that I've gone through. Yeah. So that becomes it's called, the training is called positive psychology coaching or mentoring or counseling. And so I do offer that for creative people along with private lessons. Those have all been online lately.
Well, dude, this has been so awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time and being part of this because I think it's a great story. And, I'll put a link to all your stuff in the show notes and stuff.
Just jeffreymince.com has got all my stuff in one place. But, ultimately, it's just been really good to see you.
Absolutely. I know. I was trying to think. It's probably at least been 15 years since we've seen each other. And next time I'm in Denver or next time you're in LA, come by. Let's jam. Let's play together. Let's make a reason, or I'll come by.
Yeah,
bring a
totally agree. Yeah. Like my plan is to get back to LA in the next 6 months or so. Oh, well, I mean, I'm definitely going there to do a few things business wise, but I'd like to actually live in the area again. But it'd be good to meet your kid. I'm assuming he's named Jeffrey.
I have an Uncle Jeff that would have loved that too, but no, his name is Lenin.
Oh, nice.
So
nice. Yeah. After the Marxist Russian ruler.
Exactly. Just right. Keeping it socialist.
Keeping it socialist.
Well, that was more of a kind of a half catch-up, half interview. So I hope you enjoyed that. I did. But it was interesting looking back, and I guess I didn't realize at the time how much we had in common as far as just, I think what we had in common was just that we were so driven to be great musicians, and the musicianship we can't let it go. We just want to be better all the time, and it's driven both of us to, move to crazy places like Los Angeles, California, where it's a harder place to live than Denver. Denver's a really nice, comfortable place, but we both have this crazy drive in us that's hard to let go of. I guess I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it seems pretty obvious. But that's always the challenge, to find the balance between not feeling challenged as a musician and maintaining some kind of quality of life, that's comfortable, and they don't always go together. That's for sure. I've often described being a musician as a blessing and a curse, because it's great that I have this drive to do something, and I have something that I love, and I've been very fortunate and worked really hard to make my living at it. But at the same time, there's not really any chance of getting off this train. It's just I have to be a musician. It's just one of those things that's in you. And if you're out there deciding whether to make a go at it, I think that's a good test. It wasn't a decision for me. I had to do this. I think I might have said that on another podcast, but this just brings it all up, all over again. He mentioned Reggae on the Rocks, which is a big reggae festival at Red Rocks Amphitheater each year in Morrison, Colorado. And I mentioned the DoD tours, which it stands for Department of Defense. So it's basically like cover bands would get these tours and tour military bases all over the world. So it was a great way to see Europe, and get paid for it. I went to Europe in '92 with a band from Denver called Chucky and the Cyclones. Shout out to them. Eric Valentine also produced Smash Mouth, and we mentioned him on the Greg Camp episode. Siddhartha is a 1922 novel by Hermann Hesse that deals with the spiritual journey of self-discovery of a man named Siddhartha during the time of the Gautam Buddha. TV Glotzer is the song by Nina Hagen Band, which was a cover of White Punks on Dope by the Tubes. Her version had different lyrics, and they were in German. By the way, if you have any questions that I fail to address in this ending segment or comments about anything, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out on Facebook or fan mail at divebarrockstar.com, because I would absolutely love to hear from you. So I hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll talk to you on the next one. I'm a Dive Bar Rockstar. Wow, you've made it to the end. I'm hoping it's because you completely enjoyed yourself and are now filled with knowledge and inspiration to move forward with your dreams. If that is the case and you would like to stay informed of new episodes, live events, and general news, please go to divebarrockstar.com and sign up for the mailing list. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or complaints about anything you hear on the show, please email me at fanmail@divebarrockstar.com, and you may even end up on the show. We at the Dive Bar Rockstar podcast, with all of our hearts, thank you for listening, and remember, it's all about dreams.